Who wants to talk about the dark side of business? Portfolio is pro-business. We focus on the positive attributes of the business world. But there's no denying that these are dark times for American capitalism. Unemployment is alarmingly up. The markets, though recovering nicely at last, have been horribly down. And every day brings a new screaming headline about some new act of white-collar criminality, including by far the largest and most wide-ranging investment fraud of all time. Bernie Madoff and his little circle of so-called feeder funds have set the bar very high, and Mark Dreyer, recently a high-flying hedge fund attorney of New York and the Hamptons, was convicted for actually impersonating his own former clients in order to defraud major investment companies of millions. Like fish exposed on the sand by a receding tide, financial miscreants tend to turn up in a downturn. It's not a pretty sight. In times like these, business readers are hungry for information about their problems. How did this happen? Who is to blame? And how do we get out of this mess? It's a busy time for publishers. Typically, we have more worthy books on offer than we can possibly push out before readers lose interest again or move on to something new and usually more cheerful. So I have to make difficult decisions about which books to pursue and which to leave to my competitors. Then there's the whole matter of timing. A hot news story can drive sales when we've got the timing right, but can suffer the fate of week-old fish if we get the timing terribly wrong. This knack of timing is not exactly innate, at least it isn't for me as a publisher. Many times I have gotten the timing wrong or come up on the wrong side of an issue, or both. I remember one especially painful time several downturns ago, when a book exposing the junk bond king Michael Milken dominated the bestseller list for months. Shortly after the publication of that expose, I think it was before, but it might have been a little afterwards, I signed a book by an eminent journalist which took a much more positive view of the notorious financier. The argument about insider trading is a funny one. And for a guy who runs a gigantic investment empire like Drexel Burnham, who piggybacks on the investments of his people when he knows which way a stock is going to go, that's a very small part of his business. It's not that people were insanely jealous of how much money he was making, and they were determined to bring him down. And the only thing they could bring him down around was the fact that he was piggybacking on these deals. You know, stocks that were worth a penny one day and $1 the next. And I don't think he ever had any remorse, and I think he felt like he got totally railroaded and screwed. And I think he did. And I agree, I think he did. I don't think he was a crook. I think he was playing by the rules as they existed at that time. So eventually the guy was sent off to do hard time, and you know, he was disgraced for a while. He did end up with a personal net worth of $2.5 billion, which is some consolation. And he's been barred from the securities profession, but so, you know, actually Jesse's argument, the book we published, had merit. But the problem is that if you get the timing wrong and you publish your book at a point where public opinion is just completely solidified against somebody, there's just no way to win. It was very interesting. It was a good lesson for me. It's probably saved us a lot of heartache, that particular lesson. Undaunted, I went on to publish many, many more books about ensuing business emergencies, with outcomes varying from indifferent to spectacular. The story of the latest one began last winter when the Madoff revelations first hit the headlines. We all pondered whether to pursue a book on the subject and who might write it on a super fast schedule. Within a few days, the youngest member of our editorial team, a brand new assistant named Brooke, found a blog on the Condé Nast website written by one Aaron Arvidland, a terrific reporter who had written one of the first widely published articles, in Barron's as it turns out, back in 2001, questioning the lofty profits reported by Madoff and strongly implying that Madoff's so-called investment strategy was impossible to duplicate and therefore probably fraudulent. Clearly, this writer had a huge jump on the competition. She knew all the background. She already knew most of the major sources. She was identified with the story. So Brooke ran with it, and about 5 months later, we had a manuscript. Aaron's book was fantastic, a splendid piece of work, and in record time. To quote the Wall Street Journal review by no less than Edward J. Epstein, Aaron's book not only brings great lucidity to the subject, but supplies invaluable context about the devices that Mr. Madoff used to perpetuate his confidence game. She even shows how the Securities and Exchange Commission works or fails to work. It's a terrific book, and I guess I had learned my lesson. Madoff had already pleaded guilty by the time we published, so I was in no danger of repeating my mistake of so long ago when my book exonerated a criminal who was already doing time and against whom popular opinion had long since turned.